Welcome again to continuation of our study in Ultimate Reconciliation, and today we get to lesson number 3. But before we proceed with lesson number 3, I want to pinpoint that I will be posting the paragraph or a passage, an article, numbering a few biblical verses from both the Old and the New Testament, which support Ultimate Reconciliation teaching. I will be posting it on the Facebook page, on our Facebook page, Pentecostal Universalism or Pentecostal Universalist Life of Faith Ministry. And you can go and follow the page on Facebook and read the passage or the article associated with lesson number 2, which we just finished in the last video. Today we start on the defensive. You see, in the first 2 letters, we were setting the stage for the teaching of Ultimate Reconciliation, pinpointing the logic behind it, as well as taking some biblical or studying some biblical passages that actually teach Ultimate Reconciliation briefly, but clearly and obviously. Now, today we start to address the other teaching through a study, a biblical study as well, where we will be confronting the popular teaching of eternal conscious torment. And in lesson 3, we will start studying the term hell and its uses in different languages of the Bible. And then we will move into the terms used in the Bible to describe this hell, Gehenna, and other terms that are usually thought to mean eternal conscious torment. So we will be addressing now the teaching and we will be confronting and clarifying what the Bible actually says when people understand it to mean eternal conscious torment. And today we're going to start with the term hell. Hell across the ages, lesson 3. And what I mean with across the ages, rather it is across both the Old and the New Testament, because we need to understand how this teaching evolved in order to understand how we reached here and how this false teaching of eternal conscious torment got perverted in a way or evolved in a way to reach where we are right now, which means that originally it wasn't believed to be as the popular understanding is today. So we proceed with the first question, and before that, the Bible verse connected to this lesson is taken from the ESV version, and I take part of Matthew 16:18. It says, "On this rock I will build my church, and the gates of hell shall not prevail against it." Now, hell in this verse is the Greek word Hades, because this is very relevant and we need to understand when we talk about hell, we need to know what is the original language term that was translated hell in such places. Now let's get into this study. Now, especially in the English language, there is a lot of confusion. In the English translations of the Bible, there's a lot of confusion of what is hell, what is Hades, what is Sheol, what is Gehenna, what is, the pit. All these terms and different translations do a different job. Some try to transliterate. For example, in the Old Testament, they use the term Sheol and Hades. Now, the problem is that they are creating confusion because they are not consistent in their translation. That's why if you want to study the Bible properly and you want to understand the Bible properly, you always have to refer back to the term used in the original language in order to have a clear understanding what is meant in that paragraph. So, setting this right and correctly, for every verse that we will be reading today, I will be referring to the original language term used and not to the translations, because translations, especially to the English language, are very confusing and there is a variation between different translations. So let's start with the Old Testament and the understanding of the Old Testament. And we start with question number 1, related to paragraph Genesis 37, or the verse mentioned in Genesis 37:35, and also the same concept is repeated in Genesis 42:38, Genesis 44:29, and 31. Now, the question is, the first mention of the word in Hebrew, Sheol here, where did Joseph end up after the supposed death, according to his father Jacob? And where did Jacob expect himself to go after death? The answer is in Genesis 37 and verse 35. Genesis 37:35 states these words: "All his sons and all his daughters arose to comfort him, but he refused to be comforted, and he said, 'For I shall go down into the grave to my son in mourning.' Thus his father wept for him." Now, here the term grave, translated in the New King James Version that I'm reading from as grave, actually it is Sheol. In the Arabic language, the term here is al-Hawiya, which is the translation used typically for Sheol in the Old Testament and for the Greek word Hades in the New Testament. So here, Joseph is saying that he will go down to his son Joseph in Sheol, so they will both end up in Sheol. So the term Sheol, obviously translated in the New Testament Hades, and by many translations it is translated hell, actually does not mean eternal conscious torment or even temporary torment for the say, because here we see that one of the patriarchs, Jacob, was going to end up in Sheol with his son Joseph, both considered prophets in the Old Testament and in the Jewish faith. So obviously it is mentioned here that Sheol is not a place, or clearly from the context, it's not a place of torment. We move on to another reference. Job 7:7 and 10, 7 to 10. So in Job chapter 7, the question related to this paragraph is, according to Job's basic faith, what are the metaphors used for those who end up in Sheol? "Oh, remember that my life is a breath. My eye will never again see good. The eye of him who sees me will see me no more." So it is unseen. "While your eyes are upon me, I shall no longer be. As the cloud disappears and vanishes away, so he who goes down to the grave." Again, here it's translated the grave, but it is in the original Hebrew language, Sheol. "So he who goes down to the grave does not come up. He shall never return to his house, nor shall his place know him anymore." So in this context, the understanding of those who go to Sheol are those who disappear from earth, who are no more on earth between us. We cannot see them anymore. They go to the unseen place. They vanish from our sight like a breath. So these are the metaphors for those who go to Sheol. Again, grave here is translated from the New King James Version from Sheol in the Hebrew language. Now we move on to the third question. From where did Jonah shout to the Lord? And do you think he was in a literal eternal hell fire then? Jonah 2:2 speaks of that. And he said, "I cried out to the Lord because of my affliction, and he answered me. Out of the belly of Sheol I cried, and you heard my voice." Jonah here is stating that he was in Sheol. He was in the belly of the fish, and he was out of sight. Was he in eternal conscious torment? Obviously not literally. So again, we see in those three places that Sheol was more of the world of the unseen. Now, let's do a study, or let's try to understand what the word Sheol means. Sheol comes from the Hebrew word that means a question. It is the same word in Hebrew and in Arabic, su'al or Sheol. Sheol is a question mark. It is unknown. It is practically, if you want to call it, it's the land of the unknown. As simple as that. Sometimes it's meant for to be the grave or the land of the dead. Everyone who disappears from this world, from our world, goes to Sheol. It was an unknown place, unclear, and actually in a Jewish thought, it was the abode of the dead. As simple as that. No indication in Sheol of any eternal conscious torment. Now, doing a word study of the word Sheol, sadly, it was translated hell in the King James Version in 31 occurrences, but it was also translated grave in a similar number, 31 occurrences as well, and the pit in 3 other places. So you see here the inconsistency. So the translators, with their preconceived idea of eternal conscious torment, they find if it fits the hell description they have in mind, they put it as hell. If it doesn't, they put it as grave. So when they see that somebody who is like a prophet or a good person in the Old Testament, in the Old Covenant, they put it as grave, like here, like they put it in the passages that we read. When it's talking about how the evil people will go into Sheol, they put it as hell. So that's again a biased and prejudiced translation, which reflected not only in the King James, but in many other translations. Typically, what Sheol means is death, grave, and the general place of the spirits after death. Though some verses mention that evildoers will end up in Sheol, still the literary context proves that death and degradation are meant in such paragraphs, according to the Old Testament popular belief system. So first, we're done with Sheol. Sheol is not a place that indicates eternal conscious torment, but rather indicates the abode of the dead, the world of the unseen, and the place that was in the dark, let's say, in the Old Covenant, because there wasn't a clear revelation in the Old Covenant. Even if you look at the Jewish belief system, you will see that there is a lot of confusion and unclarity on what happens after death. There were a lot of theories and philosophical conclusions from these few biblical verses that indicate a judgment in the afterlife. That's why we see different variations in the Jewish concept of the afterlife. Even the Sadducees did not even believe in the afterlife and believed that the spirit vanished after death and that there is no spirit world. That was one of the points of conflict between the Pharisees who believed in the afterlife and the Sadducees who did not. So let's move on into the same term as translated in the Greek scriptures, which is the Greek term Hades. Now, let's go, I'm always going to the first occurrence of every word. I try to do that because it has a relevance to look at the first occurrence of every term mentioned, or the first time it was mentioned in the Bible. We go to Matthew 11:23. Matthew 11:23, moving into the Greek scriptures. Matthew 11:23, it was the first occurrence of the word, of the Greek word Hades in the New Testament. There is a parallel passage as well in Isaiah 14:14-15. The question connected to this is, what will be brought down to Hades according to this verse? Do you think it is literal meaning or symbolic? And does it refer to degradation or to eternal torment in a literal fiery place? Matthew 11:23 reads the following, "And you, Capernaum, who are exalted to heaven, you will be brought down to Hades. For if the mighty works which were done in you had been done in Sodom, it would have remained until this day. So here we see again that Hades in the New Testament actually is not an indication of eternal conscious torment. Here we're speaking about a whole city going down to Hades. And if we look at the Greek term used, which is Hades, and according to Encyclopedia of World Mythology, Hades, which name means the unseen, was a Greek god of the realm of the dead. Now, again, it is the same or a similar notion as the Jewish Sheol, because Sheol was unknown, and the Greek Hades is the unseen. So here again we see that the Greek term used, Hades, which had a pagan origin, actually was used to indicate the world of the unseen or the world of the dead. Now let's move into a sensitive paragraph, which is used by many as an indication that Hades is a place of eternal conscious torment. And that is in Luke 16, 19 to 26, which is the story known as the story of the rich man and Lazarus. Luke 16, verses 19 to 25, explain to us or describe to us a story that Jesus gave. Some people take it literally, but let's go through it, and then I will ask a few questions to be answered with yes and no, which will indicate whether this was actually a paragraph to be taken literally or symbolically or metaphorically. So Luke 16, starting from verse 19, reads as following. There was a certain rich man who was clothed in purple and fine linen and fared sumptuously every day. But there was a certain beggar named Lazarus, full of sores, who was laid at his gate, desiring to be fed with the crumbs which fell from the rich man's table. Moreover, the dogs came and licked his sores. So it was that the beggar died and was carried by the angels to Abraham's bosom. The rich man also died and was buried. And being in torments in Hades, he lifted up his eyes and saw Abraham afar off and Lazarus in his bosom. Then he cried and said, Father Abraham, have mercy on me, and send Lazarus, that he may dip the tip of his finger in water and cool my tongue, for I am tormented in this flame. But Abraham said, Son, remember that in your lifetime you received your good things, and likewise Lazarus evil things. But now he is comforted, and you are tormented. And the story continues. But I will not dedicate a long time to describe this paragraph, because I have a particular video that I will be putting a link to in the description of this video, which you can refer to have a full analysis of the paragraph. But let's go and see whether the things mentioned in this paragraph make sense literally or symbolically. Now, comparing this story with the whole biblical concepts, and the answer is yes and no for these questions. Does a rich man end up in hell just for being rich? Of course not. There were many good rich people in both the Old and the New Covenant. Does a poor man end up in heaven just for being poor? The same, no. Does our God of love give every human an amount of good things, and once finished the person will have to suffer? Of course not, but this is mentioned in this paragraph where he says that you've lived your life here on earth and you're now suffering, while Lazarus, he was suffering on his life and now he is enjoying the afterlife, the bosom of Abraham. Is God's will for humans to live in poverty and sickness to please him and inherit eternal life? Again, of course not. Now, all of these questions indicate that the paragraph is definitely not a literal paragraph and not to be understood literally. As a result of the above, is there a strong possibility, and in my opinion, confidence, that the paragraph is rather a symbolic paragraph which intended to give a spiritual message to the Pharisees. Of course, it is. The whole paragraph cannot be taken literally for so many reasons that I counted and I mentioned in my video on this story. My take on this paragraph is simple. Abraham, or the rich man, is a symbol of the Jewish people who were rich in their covenants, in the Torah, in the promises of God, in the patriarchs and the heritage that they have, while Lazarus is the Gentile who was given the name Lazarus in relation to Eliezer, which is the same name. Eliezer is the servant of Abraham, who, if Abraham didn't get Isaac, he said, my heir would be Eliezer of Damascus. So Eliezer Lazarus here is a symbol of the Gentiles who will be participants in the inheritance of Abraham. They will be in the bosom of Abraham. Of course, not literally, of course. But who will inherit the faith of Abraham, while the Jews who were rich in the days of Jesus with all this history, the Torah, the covenants, and all the other things, they lost it because they rejected the Son of God back then. Of course, I'm talking about the Jews who rejected Jesus, not those who believed. So this is a symbolic mention. And here, Hades is the place of the unseen again, or a change in the state. Like death does a change in the state from the material, where the material dies and the spiritual goes to the world of the unseen. The rich man went into the world of the unseen, the Hades, or had a shift in status, let's say, and the result was torment away from God, rejection because they rejected God, and living away from their heritage, from the covenants, and from all the blessings and the privileges of the covenants. That's what I believe is the meaning intended in this paragraph and in this proverb. Again, we see here that the spiritual meaning is obvious and clear. Now, before we move into the third term, and we have two more terms to discuss, Gehenna and Tartarus, which we will be discussing in the next episode, let's summarize what we understood today. The two terms translated in the King James Version as hell in both the Old and the New Testament are Sheol and Hades. And we saw with examples that both of them do not indicate in themselves eternal conscious torment, but rather they indicate the world of the unseen, the state that all those who die go to after death. Next, we will continue this lesson in part 2 of this lesson, lesson number 3. God bless you and see you soon.